Welcome to the NitWits, a weekly roundtable discussion on the Penn State Nittany Lions, now in its 27th season. Our panel features a longtime Penn State media and NitWits tag team, Neil Rudell of the Altoona Mirror and Mark Brennan of Lions 24/7 with Fight on State. The NitWits are hosted by WTAJ's Ryan Riskey, and each week we welcome a former Nittany Lion as our special guest analyst. The NitWits are brought to you by Irwin Financial, Raymond James, a firm foundation for your financial future. By DeLeo Games, serving the community since 1945. By Reed and Solaney Orthodontics, providing friendly, family-focused orthodontic care in Altoona, Bedford, and Huntington. By McAlear's Plumbing, specializing in plumbing, heating, and air conditioning, serving our community since 1886. By RE/MAX Results Realty Group, committed to a culture of professionalism, productivity, and exceptional service. By Dorman's Jewelry, the answer is always Dorman's. By Brent Kogan Electrical Services, lighting the way for you. By NovaCare, Altoona and State College, the power of physical therapy. By Blair Candy Company, the one-stop shop for all your tailgating needs. Candy, snacks, paper supplies, and more. By Harry's Construction, if you can dream it, we can create it. By Lions 24/7 with Fight on State, your online home for Penn State football and recruiting coverage. And by the Altoona Mirror, featuring Penn State Game Day every Friday and Penn State Extra every Monday.
Penn State nearly avoids a disaster with a close win over Bowling Green. There's a lot to dissect as the Nittany Lions improve to 2-0 ahead of their bye week. We discuss that and more. Nittany Nation Overtime is next. Welcome into another action-packed episode of Nittany Nation Overtime. I'm your host, Ryan Riskey. I'm joined by the NitWits, Mark Brennan, Neil Rudell, and former Nittany Lion captain Mike Irwin. And guys, a nail-biter there for Penn State. And just what are your general thoughts on how close this one was?
You know, I don't know if you'd start with me. I've been way off. I had a close game at West Virginia, and I had a blowout here, although you did too. But,
yep.
You know, I was most disappointed in their defense. The defense didn't appear to be ready to play. It took them 40 minutes to get a lead in this game. 0 sacks. Bowling Green definitely did a great job. Impressed with them. I think they will win a lot of games. Maybe they'll win the MAC. But Penn State took a step backward, I thought.
Yeah, Joe Paterno used to say you make the most improvement between week 1 and week 2. This was like the opposite of that. And I agree with Neil. I mean, to me, the defense was the most troubling. You come out and you play extremely flat. I mean, it just wasn't there. And that Bowling Green offense with that quarterback who played really well goes up and down the field. The offense, it was like fits and starts. So the defense was not good in the first half and then really picked it up in the second half. The offense, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. Maybe that's a natural function of what happens early in a season, but it was almost as if that was the opening game, and West Virginia was like more common of what you would see in a week 2.
You have to give a lot of credit to Bowling Green. I mean,
yeah.
I read the articles about Bowling Green. Last year, they beat Georgia Tech during the regular season, and in the bowl game against Minnesota, they were real tight. And they came back. Their offensive line, I might be corrected on this, but I think averaged 366 pounds.
Wow.
And they have a bunch of transfer people that came in. So I give credit to Bowling Green for having an outstanding effort, and they were well coached and did a good job. I don't blame Penn State so much on their defense because I think it was Bowling Green's offense that took over. I mean,
and Bowling Green, honestly, to me, they looked really big and they played like it, and you could tell they won the battle at the line of scrimmage. And kind of one thing I noticed was their yards after contact. It seemed like sometimes Penn State would get to a guy and then they'd still pick up a few more yards because they fought for a few yards and then they were able to push the ball forward to get them into closer third and shorts, and then they were able to push forward to get first downs as they moved the ball.
Well, maybe I'm a glass half empty guy, but I thought that was terrible tackling.
Yeah.
I mean, and again,
Agreed.
that's something that you're not surprised to see that in week 1 because they do so little hitting in preseason camp now, but we didn't see it in week 1. We saw good tackling in week 1. So maybe this is, again, maybe this is just kind of some weird way that this team is kind of developing. I think to their credit, when they needed to make plays, they made plays. And at the end of the day, even though that was a one-possession game, I never got, I kind of got the sense that they're going to mess around until they lose this. But then on the other hand, I always kind of had a pretty good feeling that they were going to pull that thing out, and ultimately they did.
Yeah, I didn't think they were going to lose. I do think they turned it up a few levels in the second half. Abdul Carter showed you the kind of player that I think we expect him to be in the second half. But and I agree on the tackling. I just don't think they were real. Maybe the noon start, whatever. They just weren't really ready to play.
And I hope that's not the excuse that is a noon start, because you're going to have plenty of those, especially with Fox controlling the television rights deal. Do you guys think that maybe they just kind of came in expecting to show up and win and maybe underestimated Bowling Green?
I do think that's the case. I mean, I don't think you can look at the way that defense played in the first half. Mike, I agree with you. Bowling Green played extremely well coached team.
Yeah.
That quarterback is really, really good. But when you see what the Penn State defense did in the second half, I mean, clearly they were good enough to not necessarily shut them out, but to play much better than they did. Giving up 24 points is kind of ridiculous.
But you look at that quarterback the first half, and he was right on. His accuracy is 100% probably. He was like 16 for 21
great.
In passing. And the other guy that did a good job for them was Fannin. He had, 11 catches or something as a tight end. And they had a lot of good athletes there. If I'm not mistaken, the running back, Johnson, was a transfer from Auburn. So, I mean, they have a bunch of transfers in there.
And they were missing their lead back from their leading rusher. So, and you know what? Hey, Notre Dame lost. So you're seeing around the country maybe some uneven. Oregon looks already like maybe one of the more overrated teams. They've had to scramble 2 weeks in a row. So, hey, Penn State, as James said, they can build on a win, which is a lot easier than the alternative.
Yeah, Penn State had the worst performance of a top 10 team for about an hour. And then sooner or later, somebody else is going to come and actually lose. And like you said, with Oregon, they were in like a dogfight with Boise State.
And Texas beat Michigan, and then Iowa, who also was ranked in the top 25, they blew a double-digit lead to Iowa State. So it was kind of a funky day overall for college football. So, as these guys said, at the end of the day, a win is a win. They have the bye week to try to figure out what happened to get ready for Kent State.
Yeah, and hey, Kent State, how about a shout out to St. Francis? Goes and has their first win over an FBS program. Chris Valerio has done a great job. It's kind of interesting locally because Kent State will be now playing Penn State. Jeff Hohenstein, the great quarterback from Central, stepped in as well. So,
but to Ryan's point, I don't love this bye week being now. I think this, and there's nothing you can do. It's the way the schedule breaks out. But I think this Penn State team really needs to play again as quickly as possible, or it would be good if they did, and it just didn't obviously happen.
Well, maybe they'll set up a scrimmage for Tuesday.
There you go. I'm sure they'll let us in.
I was just mentioning these guys before the show that when I was down at Penn State 60 years ago.
You look good, Mike.
But the schedule, we had one lightweight, I would say, in our whole schedule. We played the Marylands and the West Virginias and the Pitts and the Army and Navy. But Kent State was one of the teams on our schedule that the only team I remember that wasn't the high level, Division I top level team, and all the other ones were.
Yeah.
So I don't know, playing all these patsies, is that good for the fans? Or is that good for the team, or who's it good for?
It's good for the
athletic department.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, they're making a lot of money.
It's good for Bowling Green to pocket $1.5 million.
And hey, unfortunately, you weren't in the Big Ten at that time, so the schedule was a little bit different, and it is front loaded with. Although I don't think you have to apologize for West Virginia, but certainly Kent State, and you're going to have a couple MAC schools.
But Joe Paterno, if he had his wishes, would be playing those teams today and have a separate league than the Big Ten.
That's right. Well.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So obviously, you hope that
show.
things change in a couple weeks against Kent State, and defensive concerns aside. Except we are going to talk about the offense when we get back from a break. We'll be right back on Nittany Nation Overtime.
The Nitwits are being brought to you by Irwin Financial Raymond James, a firm foundation for your financial future. By DeLeo Games, serving the community since 1945. By McAleer's Plumbing, specializing in plumbing, heating, and air conditioning, serving our community since 1886. And by Reed and Solaney Orthodontics, providing friendly, family-focused orthodontic care in Altoona, Bedford, and Huntington.
You're watching Nittany Nation Overtime.
Welcome back into Nittany Nation Overtime. Ryan Risky joined by Mark Brennan, Neil Rudell, and former Nittany Lion captain Mike Irwin. Guys, obviously there were defensive concerns. However, offensively, I thought they played pretty well.
Yeah, what about Tyler Warren?
Yeah.
I mean, Penn State has had a lot of good tight ends through the years, and for this guy to have the most receiving yards in a game ever by a Penn State tight end. And listen, that wasn't some wild passing craziness. They threw 20 passes in the game.
Right.
He's targeted 8 times, has 8 catches, 7 for first downs. I mean, when the NFL Combine was going on and Theo Johnson was there, a lot of those scouts were saying, hey, Theo Johnson's good. Look out for Tyler Warren. For him to come back for this team was huge because obviously he's like a safety valve there for Drew Aller. Aller's very comfortable with him. It'll be nice if they could expand the targets as the season goes along, but right now to have him is unbelievable.
Right, and they only completed 13 passes, and 8 of those were to Warren.
Yeah.
Hey, they were great on first down. I mean, I found this stat today. I couldn't believe it. Penn State's, I think, 438 yards. 313 was on first down.
More than 10 yards.
It's an
on every
unheard
first
of
down, yeah.
number. But I agree. I thought Aller looks good. He had a couple balls that, Evans scored a touchdown. He did drop a big ball early. They went to Wallace early, and they had a holding penalty that brought that back because Wallace didn't end up having another catch. And Evans pushed off on a touchdown. So there were some things to clean up, but they at least are developing a couple other options in addition to Wallace. And Warren is great. He's up there in hallowed ground now. You're talking about Qualick and Fryermuth and some of these.
Brady, I mean.
Didn't he set the record for the most yards by a tight
Yep.
end in a game? And really, he, out of 20 passes that Aller threw, he completed 8 to Tyler. I mean,
Right, Aller's only thrown 37 passes, which is less than 20 per game. So again, a lot of those passes had picked up big-time yardage.
You know what I like what that Kotelnicki's doing with Aller? He's given him a chance to make mistakes and learn. I think last year they dialed things back so much and played it so safe. They didn't take the deep shots. What Aller said after the game that he just misread the coverage on the interception. That's a learning experience.
Yeah.
When they get into a tight game against an Ohio State, he's not going to make that same mistake. He also had that terrible sack that he took.
Yeah.
Just can't do it. But he's learning. While that's not good for that game, it's good for his development as a QB.
And doing that in a game against a team like Bowling Green, too, instead of waiting for Ohio State for that to happen.
Hey, the ball he threw to Singleton to, I think, take the lead, the 15-yard pass over the middle was gorgeous. And, he's showing some mobility. I mean, this offense definitely – hey, and you had 2 backs that gained 100 yards both and averaged close to 8 or 9 yards a carry there.
but the other thing, he had Omar Evans across the middle the one time on the second or third drive that they had.
Yeah.
And he dropped the pass.
Right.
There were only a couple mistakes on the offense.
Yeah.
And Aller's 2 mistakes, the one that's scrambling and the throw into the end zone that was underthrown. But
boy,
like Mark said, he's learning from that. And that's
Yeah,
good.
I'm sorry, Mike, but Singleton, we talked about it last week. The change in that kid since the change in coordinators has been unbelievable. This is now 5 games. He's rushed for over 100 yards in 3 of them, and you're seeing what he's able to do as a receiver as well. And those guys are blocking well. Katron Allen, he looked a little down in the dumps after the West Virginia game on the sideline. He looked like a refreshed player. So, again, they have those core weapons that are playing really well, but they have to expand it out a little bit. Julian Fleming had 1 catch for 3 yards. Like to see him get the ball a little bit more, and maybe some of those younger receivers as well.
I thought the offensive line last week against West Virginia in particular, but up the gut, Dawkins appears to be doing a good job. I mean, they were kind of mushing them at times. You have that kind of yards per carry average. The offensive line deserves some credit.
And you're rotating in Rucci, and you're rotating in Cooper Cousins, and I think they're doing a really nice job kind of spreading the wealth on an offensive line and keeping guys fresh.
And one thing that I kind of like, the way the offenses can move quickly if it needs to. Last year, I don't think they could have done that, pick up big chunks, because I think at the end of the first quarter, Bowling Green had controlled the ball for 11.5 minutes, and Penn State was like 3.5, and it wasn't because the offense wasn't doing anything. They were just moving the ball so quickly.
Yeah, I mean, they're showing that they can win in some different ways. I know it's only 2 games so far, but I think everybody is impressed with Kotelnicki in terms of how they get the ball to people that you didn't see some of these plays last year.
Yeah, only 2 of 9 on 3rd down, though, but that's mitigated some by the damage they were doing on 1st down. When you're gaining over 10 yards per 1st down, that's skewing those 3rd down stats.
You know, I think the one disappointment was when they got in the second half. I think the offense stalled and had a couple empty series there.
That's
with
what
the
I
chance
meant
to put it away.
about the up and down nature of it. They got to be a little bit more smooth. But again, that's a new offense. So I think overall 2 games, very good.
Again, I think the one thing we've seen, this is going to be a fun offense to watch, and we might only be scratching the surface on what Andy Kotelnicki has planned.
And Singleton and Allen both had 100 yards in both games now, so they're doing great. I mean, they have a great offense on the running game.
I don't think Allen had 100 last week.
I thought he did.
He had the touchdown.
Struggled.
Yeah. He had a touchdown catch, and the way they're using him. But
I thought he had maybe a.
But to Mike's point, what I would say, Mike, is that I think you're going to see different games where one of those backs may do real well and the other one may not have as many yards. There's nothing wrong with that. I think, and that's why when I talked about Catron, I think he only averaged 2 yards per carry against West Virginia, and he was on the bench at the end of the game. Guys were coming over like, hey, cheer up a little bit. You're winning the game. They have to realize that with this offense, there may be a game where Harrison Wallace has 100 yards receiving one game, then no catches. That's okay so long as you're winning and so long as you're generating the yards.
And one thing, the way they're utilizing them in the passing game, where they might not do as much on the ground, except they can also make up for that in the pass game because of the way they're just trying to get their best players onto the field right now.
Yeah, and they're doing a nice job with Prabula. I mean, they're decisive.
Yeah.
I'm going to always go back last year to the right away, 3rd and 1 at Ohio State, and they were totally indecisive, ended up getting penalized, didn't know what they wanted to do. James said they were going to go for it on 4th down. It was mass confusion at the key moment in that football game, and there's so much more solid decisions and quick decisions now.
Well, guys, definitely a lot to like about with the offense. We have to take another break now. We'll continue this conversation. You're watching Nittany Nation Overtime.
The Nitwits are being brought to you by RE/MAX Results Realty Group, committed to a culture of professionalism, productivity, and exceptional service. By Dorman's Jewelry, the answer is always Dorman's. By Blair Candy Company, the one-stop shop for all your tailgating needs. Candy, snacks, paper supplies, and more. And by Harry's Construction. If you can dream it, we can create it.
You're watching Nittany Nation Overtime.
Welcome back into Nittany Nation Overtime. Ryan Riskey joined by Mark Brennan, Neil Rudell, and Mike Irwin. And guys, we were just talking about the offense, and I had one last thing I wanted to point out is, I know I brought this up last week. Nick Singleton's longest run last year was 24 yards. He has 3 already this year that are more than 40.
Yeah, and has he lost any weight? He just has an extra.
He looks
gear.
faster.
Yeah.
But he's pushing 230, so he's just big and fast, and so is Catron. I mean, both of those guys are big and fast. Their longest run last year was 50 yards, and that is going to go down at some point during this season.
Right, and it's good to see. We're seeing that explosion that they had from their freshman year that we just didn't see last year.
Well, and I think part of it is that their opposing defenses have other things to worry themselves about, and they're not being as predictable as they were last year. I think people were able to game plan against Nick Singleton. It's not as if with 2 games to go in the regular season last year, some magic button came on. They changed coordinators and gave him more opportunities to do what he's doing.
But their offensive line has something to do with it. I
Sure.
mean, they're playing great right now, and if he gets into the secondary, look out, he's gone.
That was the button, the eject button. Hey, how about Zahedek?
Oh, absolutely. Switching over to special teams, he made both field goals and all 4 extra points.
Yeah, I mean, that's a guy, I mistakenly said last week, I think, that he had missed all of his field goals in his career. As a freshman, he was 1 of 2, but that one was a 20-yarder. So last year, misses 2 field goals against West Virginia, is pulled in favor of Falcons, never gets a shot. This year, misses 1 against West Virginia. I'm so glad they stuck with him.
Yeah.
Because you've been there, Ryan. You see him in practice. When he's kicking in Haluba Hall, it's like thunder coming off of his left leg. And he has the talent. They don't give you a scholarship unless you're really good. And I'm glad they gave him the opportunity, and it was so nice to see him come through in a situation, in a tight game. This wasn't a blowout. These were important kicks. They win by 7. He had 6 of them in the extra points.
Yeah.
Well, he put them up 3, and then at the end they scored another touchdown. But Bowling Green was still in the contest at that point, up until the last.
Yeah. It was a 3-point game with 5 minutes to play. I don't think the outcome was so much in jeopardy, but hey, it was a 43-yard shot too. Ended up being his first field goal.
High pressure situation too.
Yeah.
This wasn't the blowout that everybody expected it to be.
Yeah, Riley Thompson continues to play really well. And how about a shout out to Kobe King? You put a linebacker on the hands team. And he was hilarious after the game in the media room. He's like, "Oh yeah, I have great hands. I have some of the best hands on the team." Well, he showed it, and that was a big
That was key.
That
because
kick took a huge bounce too.
Yeah.
Right. That was a good onside kick, and it was really his jump that corralled. And I thought Caden Saunders, he did fumble. He has to clean that, huh?
He redeemed himself.
Right, but he also came aggressively up and fielded a kind of a low line drive punt that if he doesn't, it could be back there another 15 yards.
Yeah, I mean, obviously a lot to like here on special teams, and I guess I want to get your guys' opinion about the confidence that James showed in Sander to give him that extra shot that he didn't get last year.
Yeah, well, I mean, they only took 2 kickers to West Virginia. Meyer, the transfer, was the other one, and I guess Ryan Barker, the walk-on, is also in it. But again, this is your scholarship guy. You stick with him, give him the opportunity, and it paid off, the confidence.
Yeah, we asked James about that on Monday, and he said he's going to make the next one. So he did show a lot of public confidence. Just for you, because you would know, I noticed Grunkenmiller was on the questionable list of the availability. Seriously, who would be their third then?
Grunkenmiller?
Well, Grunkmiller. Well, I don't know. Help.
Oh my God.
God, let's critique that.
No, actually, so the.
How do you pronounce his name, Mark?
You're throwing me off. The Jack Lambert would have been the third quarterback to walk on, not the Jack Lambert, the walk-on quarterback Jack Lambert, because Jackson Smolik, I think, is still banged up and coming back from an injury. So that's who would have been their third quarterback. I
was curious because I thought when the list is put out, they put an availability sheet out now. Everybody kind of has to. When I saw he was the freshman, Grunkmiller was on there, I said, well, who's the third? Because maybe this is a game the third could have got in if things would have gone according to the 34-point plan.
Let me say this. These are the best special teams we've ever had down at Penn State. And James Franklin, to his credit, recruits all these special teams guys. And I really think that this is the most talented team we've had maybe ever.
That's a big statement, Mike.
Yeah, it definitely could be true. Anyways, so we have one thing left to do on the show, and that's crown the Nitwit of the Week. We'll get to that when we come back from break. You're watching Nittany Nation Overtime.
Don't miss a minute of Nittany Nation Overtime, now also on Apple and Spotify.
The Nitwits are being brought to you by Brent Kogan Electrical Services, lighting the way for you. By NovaCare, Altoona and State College, the power of physical therapy. By Lions 24/7 with Fight on State, your online home for Penn State football and recruiting coverage. And by the Altoona Mirror, featuring Penn State Game Day every Friday and Penn State Extra every Monday.
You're watching Nittany Nation Overtime.
Welcome back to Nittany Nation Overtime. It's time for the Nitwit of the Week, and oh, looks like me and Andrew have jumped out to a 2-0 lead on everyone.
We're going to have to start squeezing you somehow, you guys.
We're going to have to rename that the Ethan Grunkenmeyer Trophy.
To be fair, we all picked a blowout, but it's just one was just a tad closer than the others.
The way it works. Congratulations.
All right, well, thank you. We're off to a nice start. So anyways, Penn State is on a bye next week, except that doesn't mean that Nittany Nation Overtime is. The Nitwits are all going to be back next week to discuss everything going on with the program.
Yeah, we're going to have a special show where we trace the history of the Penn State Radio Network with Roger Corey, who's a longtime friend of the show. He's been a guest nitwit at times. We thought, hey, this will be interesting. We'll tell some Fran Fisher, George Paterno stories about, and also the Thursday night show. And Roger's a good storyteller.
Hey, this is 25 years for Steve and Jack. I mean, what a great run they've had, and Roger's been there even longer.
Yeah.
All right, it should be a fun show, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Again, we'll be back on next Sunday.
Thanks for watching WTAJ's Nittany Nation Overtime.
The Nitwits have been brought to you by Irwin Financial, Raymond James, a firm foundation for your financial future. By DeLeo Games, serving the community since 1945. By Reed and Solaney Orthodontics, providing friendly, family-focused orthodontic care in Altoona, Bedford, and Huntington. By McAlear's Plumbing, specializing in plumbing, heating, and air conditioning, serving our community since 1886. By RE/MAX Results Realty Group, committed to a culture of professionalism, productivity, and exceptional service. By Dorman's Jewelry, the answer is always Dorman's. By Brent Kogan Electrical Services, lighting the way for you. By NovaCare, Altoona and State College, the power of physical therapy. By Blair Candy Company, the one-stop shop for all your tailgating needs. Candy, snacks, paper supplies, and more. By Harry's Construction, if you can dream it, we can create it. By Lions 24/7 with Fight on State, your online home for Penn State football and recruiting coverage. And by the Altoona Mirror, featuring Penn State Game Day every Friday and Penn State Extra every Monday. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.